Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Tara Fisher, who shares her skills journey from birth doula into adult education, working within corporate HR and more specifically on learning and development and training. I hope you enjoy. I want to welcome Tara Fisher to today's show. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about the things that I have experienced in life that are a little bit different than other people's experiences. So I'm excited to share it.
We can look at that from a few ways. One is interesting insight into something I had no idea about, didn't even know existed, or outside curiosity and I've always wanted to know more about, or inspiration to the people who are like, wow, that sounds interesting. Now I'm going to pursue that. Or I'm going to look more into that stuff. So I love when people have different backgrounds, but I equally love it when people have fairly standard backgrounds because it's all about inspiring people and giving them more insight and skills, strategies to apply to their roles. So
when people have a non-traditional background, it can bring in different perspectives, right, in your workplace. So things can be kind of stagnant if you have people from very similar backgrounds, very similar education. It can get stagnant, and not because people don't care and not because they aren't willing to learn more. It's just there's only so many perspectives you can have if you're in a certain place. So my hope is to bring in other perspectives so that people can see things from a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
To find those solutions, right? Because sometimes we need that little different viewpoint to just find like a little thing that's a better solution.
Do you think from a colleague, coworker standpoint, they have more confidence and interest in working alongside someone who has essentially the ideal parallel background that they do, the same overlapping background? Or do you think that they look at it as, I love working with people who have varying backgrounds that are quite different because it gives that diversity? I'm not sure which one gives more confidence to a coworker.
I think it depends on the person. I'm the type of person, I like lots of diversity in thought and people and experiences, and I'm a lifelong learner. I will take on any project and learn about it and become what we call a subject matter expert, even though I'm not officially supposed to in my role, but I can't help it, right?
Yeah.
But that's me. That doesn't mean that it's not valuable. Somebody who goes to their job every day and they do their job and they go home and it is the same thing every day and they are comfortable with that and they are happy in their lives and they feel successful and they don't need all of those shifting changes because maybe they have a lot of shifting changes like in other parts of their lives. So it just depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
I've worked in a lot of different places. Being a learning experience designer, it's a really good thing because
Yeah.
I know lots of different things and I know how different places work and how they work together and how they could work together better.
There's a time and place and a need for both the specialist and the
Yes.
generalist. You really need
Yeah.
to have the opportunity for people to be really, really deep into the specificity of the technical elements of those roles, as well as the larger picture person that could get it 60% of the way there because they're a generalist and they have the ability to just pick up and learn a subject matter to the point of getting the ball rolling or getting it a little
Right.
farther and getting it maybe even the problem solved, maybe not perfectly, but really, really well and good enough. Having a team that is diverse that incorporates both of those learning styles, mentalities, and individuals, it's an all-star team.
Right. I can't tell you how many great experiences I've had over my career working with great teams. Sometimes you bond together maybe under not so great circumstances, like you have a leader that's not so great,
Sure.
and you commiserate together, but it really is important for people to work together, especially nowadays because everybody's working remote. Not everyone, but a larger portion of people than 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
The ability to come in remote positions, it helps a whole swath of people come into jobs that they weren't able to do before. That already is bringing in more people and more talent and more skills and more perspectives, right? So that we can shift how work is,
Yeah.
because that's kind of my goal.
Yeah. It's great from an internal standpoint, the ability to work differently internally, but also from a talent pool, the ability to find anybody that you're looking for a specific role from not just, where you live right here, but I mean, it could be international. Depends on what your
Mhm.
needs are. there's a lot of pluses and minuses, benefits and challenges that have emerged from the remote working style. And I would argue that there are more positives that have come out of it. And I would also argue that the challenges or negatives aren't universal and aren't necessary. So if there's things that you dislike about it, you can find another job that is either hybrid or in person. It's not like it has to be so binary.
Right. That's a huge thing for me personally because, if we want to talk about the transition of careers, I went from being a birth and postpartum doula, not working in offices, not working in corporate environments, working for myself. So working at home and then obviously working in hospitals and birth centers and homes. And so I was a very nomadic worker that transitioned to that corporate space and the office space. It's not that I hadn't done it before, but that transition was a bit of a shock. I didn't really want it. Like, I didn't want to go back to an office. I
Yeah,
hated being in offices. I really hate it. I'm just gonna be honest. Like,
that's
I will
fine.
tell any future employer, any client, I know it's a necessary evil. I know. I
It's not a
understand. And
necessary evil. There are trade-offs and you have more control over a lot of these things. I do believe that
yeah,
you don't have to suffer through work. You should actually ideally
yeah.
find the job that fits you and that you're happy and fulfilled through. So maybe there's the misnomer or the perception that this is what work looks like. Here's the definition of it and fit it
Mhm.
into this box. But really, it's a lot more broad and diverse. And there's a very liberal definition of work today. There's so many things that you can
Mhm.
do. In fact, I mean, you can
Yeah.
criticize it. There's a lot of people getting paid to do things that at my age, I don't get it. I don't understand younger generations. And
People are paying for it.
that's great. If they're paying
So,
for it, that's exactly what the market is all about.
right.
If there's a need, you can fill it.
I do understand it from their perspective of seeing people being able to create things and make money off
Yeah.
of them. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I'm a musician. Like, musicians don't make money from their so
No, but they're often very happy.
we do it because it's like breathing.
You
So,
have to.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that non-traditional background. Tell us about it.
So I grew up on a farm about an hour outside of the Kansas City area, so very close to the Missouri state line. My first job was being a hostess at a restaurant called Joe's Barn in Stanley, Kansas. It was a buffet restaurant. We had a lot of people that from my local high school that worked there, but there were a lot of older individuals that had worked there for a long time. I mean, it had been around for decades. So within like 3 months of hosting and seating people, they made me a server. It was a buffet restaurant, so you're not really serving food, but you're serving drinks and you're picking up lots of plates and bussing and things like that. Even at 16, I ended up training new servers, right? So it's always been a theme from the very beginning. So that's where I started, right? And fast forward a few years, my 20s, they're very blurry. I was in a rock band. I was working corporate jobs, temp jobs. I was not happy with anything I was doing. I was also doing graphic design at the time. I really enjoyed graphic design. I had worked at a .com and learned it on the job. Everything I know, I've learned on the job.
Did it bother you? Did you have
Everything.
an imposter syndrome that you didn't go to school for
Absolutely.
this or learn? So what got you through that, convincing your brain that it was okay and acceptable for you to do that?
I don't know that I had the confidence. I just did them. My father became a pretty successful man. There is something to be said for the fact that he did not have a college degree and ended up being the CEO of a company. I think knowing he had those experiences gave me a little bit of confidence, like, because he would always talk about that, how he had imposter syndrome and he would
He
go
did.
to these, yeah. And he would go to these, huge like stockbroker meetings in New York and like, everyone else there they're from wealthy, rich families and they all went to Ivy League colleges.
Fancy
So,
degrees and
yeah. Yeah.
pinstripe suits.
Yes. So I have a lot more confidence now, but I wouldn't say back then I did. I still very much had imposter syndrome. It carried over probably until I would even say in the last couple years.
What changed in the last few years that your mind shifted and you were suddenly past that?
I don't know, getting older.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a teacher, even from being like a little kid. But I knew that I never wanted to teach children. I think I knew that maybe I didn't have quite the patience for that. I don't know, it wasn't really very appealing to me, so I always thought that I wanted to be a college professor. That's, I think, really where my mind went for a long time. Because I was the first person in my family to get a bachelor's degree, I wanted to go beyond that, right? But financially, it just wasn't really possible, and of course, topics that I'm interested in are definitely not high-paying topics. I mean, I almost went to grad school for ethnobotany, so I just really struggled with that. I think I had to come to terms with the fact that I don't have to be a professor at a university to help adult learners. And in fact, I am sometimes doing a better job of
Yeah.
teaching adult learners than especially professors that have been doing this a long time and they haven't changed the way they teach. I guess I've just learned in this field, there's a lot of people up on the top echelons that are good at what they do, but they cannot teach people how to do what they do, right? That's a totally different skill.
This keeps coming up in conversations, and it's one that I have been sensitive to in years past, just professionally speaking, that you have a top performer who then the obvious next step is to move them into management, but then they're not doing the things that they were so good at and might even actually enjoy, in addition to maybe not being such great people leaders. We promote somebody, we say,
Mhm.
congratulations, you did a good job, and now you are in charge of other people. And there's so many other skills necessary that have to be either intrinsic in some ways, and as well as some that are learned skills that you experience, and you have a mentor that teaches you, and you go through the trial and error and you make mistakes and you learn from them. And over time, you get better at that job. But not everybody is going to get better at that job. And yet it's
Mhm.
typically what we do for people that are good at their job or subject matter experts. And they eventually get put into positions where they are, let's call it teaching, whether they are a
Mhm.
manager, mentor, advisor,
Yeah.
professor, head of a department, head of a company. There's so many skills that are necessary for you to be good at teaching and mentorship.
And the funny thing is that even though I said I didn't really want to teach children, so watching my kids go through elementary school, I just watched these amazing teachers work with all of these elementary school kids and just watching them do the things that they do in the classroom, I'm like, "Oh, wait, we could learn a lot from them." I think we just get caught up in the, "I gotta be an adult."
Yeah. People are putting expectations on us. It's time
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
take control and put the expectations on ourselves that we want for ourselves,
yeah.
the goals and vision for ourselves. And
It was a struggle even in the last, probably 10 years, 11 years of getting back to the corporate world and not kind of being taken seriously. Or I can do a lot of corporate speak, but I also don't really speak to people differently, whether they're a CEO or they're a crew member at a fast food restaurant. When I was working for a law firm a few years ago, it was brought up in one of my reviews of how easily I talk to people, how easily I would talk to general counsel of some of the biggest retailers in the world. And it's like I was a doula. In the birth room, everybody's the same.
not changing your speech pattern, language, behavior, regardless of who you're speaking to, the first reaction to some people is context is important and it's important
Mhm,
to change language, code switch
mhm.
essentially.
Yep.
But I do think that you're praised for that in your performance reviews. The positive feedback that you're getting about that is, I think that's actually indicative of society,
Mhm.
especially 2025. Be relatable.
It's just really important right now to be direct.
Yeah, transparency.
No dancing around the issue. No one wants dancing around right now.
I agree. Sometimes get to the point, just say it.
Yeah,
I have passed up so many professional opportunities of late because I don't sell myself. I'm not interested in
yeah,
overselling myself or convincing you to hire me either as a consultant or professionally full time because I'm not interested in selling myself. And I look at that as taking control of my life. Like,
mhm.
if you want me, you tell me. I'm not here to
Right,
convince you, right? That's fine.
yeah,
There's a little bit of a difference. But when you're in certain corporate roles that require you to close a deal, build a relationship farther, press for certain performance, you have to be transparent.
right, and let's say, someone does something that upsets someone else on your team, right? And you're the leader, and instead of telling that person that they upset someone or, intervening if you need to, right? You just keep those two people a little bit further away from each other. Don't put them on a project together. That doesn't solve the problem. And if the person that offended the other person or hurt the other person's feelings doesn't know that they did that, how can they correct it? I'm a parent. My kids mirror me every day. I am trying to learn to be a better parent every day. All of those things together, I'm just trying to help people be better people, right? So that they feel happy in their lives and they feel successful, whatever that means for them, because it's definitely different for every person. I just want them to enjoy their job as much as they can. It's still a job. But I mean, I've been lucky. I've been able to work at a job being a doula. I mean, it was my calling. Like, it was the greatest job in the world.
So what made you leave it?
It doesn't pay well. It's not a sustainable model for working. I was training to be a midwife, and you have to work on your own and be on call 24/7. It's really a profession for people who can afford to do it. And at the time, I was a married woman who was a stay-at-home mom, but I didn't want to just stay home. I wanted to do some other thing. I wasn't quite sure what it was. Initially I thought that I would go back to work after like 6 months, and I was just like, no way. This is not what I envisioned in my life. I have to do something different. Not that it wasn't hard going from two incomes to one, but I had the ability to kind of squeeze things together and get it figured out. And then the doula work allowed me to be able to work part-time, so kind of run my own business, right? But still be able to be with my kids most of the time, right? I did most appointments in the evenings and on the weekends when my husband was home. Obviously, births, you can't plan any of that, but I had backup upon backup upon backup, situations so that if the kids needed to be watched, right? But that's a lot. That's a lot on a family. There's a high divorce rate for birth workers. It's a very demanding job, and birth workers tend to maybe bend over backwards a little too much for their clients because they love what they do, right?
Yeah.
They're so dedicated to what they do that they cause harm in their own lives. My marriage ended, and I'm sure that contributed to it. There were lots of other issues, but I tried to make it work. In 2014, I went through a pretty financially devastating divorce and, went from being this kind of part-time doula training to be a midwife, but didn't have a full-time job and hadn't had a full-time job in, I want to say 7, 8 years. I was trying to piece together contract jobs, right? So that I could still work on call. I don't know. There were just a number of things that came up. And there was like a Saturday that I came home from a childbirth education class that I had taught. And I came home to my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband. And I just said, I can't do it anymore. I can't. I mean, I was crying, I was in tears. It was the greatest job. I was really good at it, but it's just, you can't make money at it. You just can't.
It's sad because you wanna live your truth. You wanna really
Mhm,
take advantage of all of your strengths, and you wanna do these things that are
mhm,
so meaningful to you. But at the end of the day,
mhm,
you need to support yourself, and you need to be able to reconcile the time spent
mhm.
with the value that you're earning for that time. And it's so hard sometimes for some passions to really line up with the value with what I'm good at, what I love, and what's going to
Mhm.
earn enough. Musicians too. You're a musician. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. Like people who are musicians, oftentimes that dream is, I wish I could do this for a living. I wish I could support my
Yeah.
family and do this.
Yeah.
And it's actually similar to a doula in that it's an expression of your emotions. It's that I'm
Yeah.
here in service of the audience, the mother, the family. I'm here in service, and I'm going to give a lot of myself to you, and I'm going to leave it all up out there. And you feel a purpose, and it's weird hours,
Yeah.
and it's it's hard to plan around, and you never know when things come up, but it's
Yeah.
meaningful work.
It is very meaningful. It's a sad thing in our society that we don't pay our teachers, we don't pay our healthcare workers, we don't pay all the people who lift us up,
Yeah.
even our musicians, right?
Yep.
Because without music, well, we're just not human, honestly. My husband's a stroke survivor, and that is what brought him back to life, being able to go back and sing and play guitar because he thought he wouldn't be able to do it. But that's what keeps him going. You were talking about books. I was thinking about this before we met today, and I was thinking about how, like, in my world, in learning experience design and workplace training, like a lot of people talk about a lot of management books and things like that, right? And the book that like drives me is actually The Body That Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
That's more of a guiding principle for me because I'm trauma informed. So that's why I apply it to all of my work, because I believe that probably 95% of us are walking around completely traumatized and we have no idea that we are. And we take it out on each other.
The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a doctor. So many times I've heard this book mentioned or recommended. I've never read it.
There are debates about fMRIs, which is like a different type of MRI than the other kind.
Measures the
Yeah.
brain frequencies.
Yeah. So there's debates about the accuracy of that. But I'm an abuse survivor. I have PTSD. I
Yeah.
read that book. That is a good book for abuse survivors. It's hard. It's really hard to get through.
What was the big takeaway for you from that book that you're still thinking about? Something from the book that was really instrumental in helping you process?
Adverse childhood events rewire us, and we don't necessarily have control over how we respond to things because it has rewired us, right? It's not my fault. I'm not saying that I'm not responsible for my reaction to things because that's what I'm always continually working on. And I'm not always good at, good reactions to things. But having that feeling of like, this is something that happened to me and like my brain rewired itself. I don't have any control over what that was. It's not just about how the abuse was not my fault, right? It's about the fact that like my response to it is also not my fault. The way my brain rewired itself is not my fault. But my responsibility is to understand this and know this and work on myself, because my abuse and my PTSD will cause me to react in ways to people that causes harm because I learned harm. So I don't want to cause harm. A quote that I always remembered when I was a doula was, "What will she remember?" Birth is a very visceral experience, and people remember things that you wouldn't think that they would remember, and things that don't seem harmful can sit in a person's mind for many years and no one knows. It's a big responsibility to be in a birth room with somebody, and it's a little scary, but it's also like totally worthwhile. In my work now, when people say, "Oh, aren't you stressed out about this? Aren't you stressed out about this?" I'm like, Many years of being a doula and being an abuse survivor, I was always in that like hyper activity mode of like, I want to do so much that I do too much, right? I've slowly learned over time how to kind of pull that back and go, wait, my energy doesn't belong here. That's going to be not a waste of my energy, but like a draining of my energy that's maybe not necessary. And for a long time, I didn't know how to balance that in my work and in my personal life. I still struggle, like I said, but I'm getting better at it.
That's remarkable. I've never heard that before characterized or described how when talking about abuse or trauma,
Mhm.
the subject of allowing or helping the individual accept that it's not their fault is its own challenge. It's a mountain to climb and to get over. And it's true. It's never their fault. I've
No.
never heard someone then talk about the results of that. The reaction or the rewiring was also not your fault. You're not in control of
Mhm.
that. That wasn't you. And to describe it that way allows for more patience and accepting for somebody to continue to recover beyond what they thought. Okay, I'm accepting that it was not my fault. The abuse
Yeah.
or trauma. I get that. Took me a while. Now I'm past that. There's residual effect that lingers. It manifests in other different ways. And to talk about that separately as its own individual challenge, if you go through trauma and abuse and your brain is rewired at a young age, what would it take to help rewire it back to a healthier state later on in life?
I mean, his suggestions are really, you're not really rewiring because once you hit about 25, your brain stops really,
Yeah. Frontal lobe
developing at that
cortex is
point.
done.
Yeah. And you can see why, like, the younger a person is, like, how much more impactful that could be because there's more cells growing,
Yeah.
you've got more growth earlier on than later. So, I mean, for me, it's been things like becoming a doula. Becoming a doula helped me heal. I don't wanna say that I use my clients to help me heal, but it certainly helped me heal.
All jobs are mutually beneficial, and you're there for
Yeah,
when you are
yeah,
in any service providing business and you're an individual providing something, you're giving the benefits of that service, hopefully to your clients, and you are earning and learning from those experiences
right,
as well. You're not taking advantage of them negatively. You are leveraging an opportunity and exposure to
right.
situations and individuals that help you as a human being grow.
I think the thing about being a doula was it was like the embodiment of this type of person, right? And I wanted to be that person. I wanted to
Mm.
be this like calm earth mother, like I'm just everything's cool and I'm not stressed about anything. I'm not like that. But in the birth room, I am very quiet and I am very calm and it is a very different space, and I'm a different person in that space, and it's very calming, and it's things can be chaotic in birth, sure, but I mean, like, the space itself, like, there's nothing abnormal about what you're doing in a birth, Like,
Yeah.
it's a natural state of being. It's sort of like being in nature. You're kind of watching nature happen, right? Not everybody's gonna be able to become a doula or want to become a doula to help with their abuse, right? And to help recover from their abuse. But there's things like I went through yoga teacher training, not because I wanted to be a yoga teacher, but because I needed that deeper practice to help me heal. And it did, it helped me heal. And sometimes I take that healing on to other people, and I like to share it with other people. Like, this is what I did, this is what helped me. But then I can take it all the way back to like learning experience design, right? You're
Yeah.
trying not to cause harm. If I have to put somebody through an hour-long training that is they're not gonna learn anything from, and let's say there's 1,000 people in this place, and everyone has to go through an hour-long training that they're not gonna learn anything from, they're not even gonna remember 5 seconds after they walk out the door or after they take the e-learning, and you've lost 1,000 production hours.
Yeah.
That's causing harm. That's causing harm to your business, it's causing harm to your workers, it's like, what a waste of time. I know everybody, we need to have compliance training. We need to check off the box, but what a missed opportunity for people to learn something new. I'm always trying to bring that, I don't know, that curiosity, but also like, don't cause harm. You
Yeah.
want to help your people do their job better. Help them do their job better. Don't make training miserable.
This is actually a perfect segue. Remember finding myself in a meeting one time. The meeting must have been pretty boring and feeling unproductive because I looked around the room and started calculating the cost of that meeting. A 1 hour meeting with about 7 or 8 people in a room who had fairly well paying positions. It was an expensive hour. And I know that we can't look at every hour of this. It actually can be counterproductive if you quantify or calculate the value of a meeting to the point where you're not scheduling meetings. And maybe that's also good. It's a balance.
Yeah.
Everything's a balance. But the point of
Yeah.
that is, how do we get the best use of this time? And then the cost and the responsibility of having this number of people in a room for 1 hour to discuss something that's actually just kind of low stakes. Do you really need all those people in the room? I know we have regulatory requirements and training that is sometimes necessary annually or maybe more frequently, depending on what you're doing. Those are regulations. Those are necessary, and you have to do these things. I get it. How do we do these things in a way that doesn't feel like a chore, like a task, an undesirable necessity that I now have to go through this training every single quarter or every single year, and it's really annoying? And what is the responsibility of the organization or maybe even the outside service providers, a consultant, a platform, somebody that's providing the ongoing L&D and certification training and all that stuff? It might not be super fun, but how do we make it
Right.
productive? How do we actually allow somebody to do this, learn something, not feel like they have to
Mhm.
figure out how to cheat and game the system where, all right, well, if I move my mouse every few minutes,
Click, click, click,
things
click,
on here,
click.
right, click through it. They're going to ask questions that are designed for me to be able to answer them, even if I didn't sit through the video or read the whole paragraph or story behind it. There are ways to game these systems, and we only game them because they feel boring and unnecessary to some of us. These things are necessary for everyone. not just legally,
Yes.
but for us to remind ourselves, hey,
Yes.
be sensitive about how you say something, what you are doing, your conduct, your behavior, sensitive information. How are you sending it? To whom are you sending it? All these things are very important. How do we do that in a way that is engaging, that the employee comes away actually feeling like they learned something? And then the third
Mhm.
is that it's responsible use of time and cost for the organization, not just checking off a box. Do you have like a hopes and dreams and a vision of what that might look like?
Well, I'd love for people to stop putting arbitrary time limits on training. There is literally no reason. I mean, I'm sure there's a reason that managers in California need to go through 2 hours of sexual harassment training, but it's not based on any science.
The reality is it's qualitative, not quantitative. It needs
Right,
to be a
right,
quality, engaging conversation or learning
right,
opportunity, not that I sat through these number of hours.
right. So here's what it comes down to is when I was a doula, I would always talk about, and even now, I talk about high tech, high touch solutions. So my hopes and dreams is that for whether it's compliance training or maybe more fun training, that companies and organizations realize that it's not the time requirement, it's the output of what happens. So the idea is that what is the work product they can create based upon their sexual harassment training? What do they have to provide, like a homework assignment? But then you start talking about administering that in an L&D department, that's a lot of administration, right? Checking
Yeah.
assignments on, people and stuff like that. I used to work for a learning platform that was all kind of baked in. So those kinds of things are possible, but it really takes leadership to understand that they're costing themselves money by not investing in good training. It's always been hard to prove ROI for L&D. And part of
Yeah.
that is because the discipline itself is a lot of teachers and a lot of facilitators and a lot of people that really like to engage and they like that kind of soft skill part of communicating and collaborating with people. They're not necessarily the people that want to look at the data, right? And that's fine. I love looking at the data. I'm a project manager, so I'm just like, how can we make more money and everybody's happier?
It's like everything you have to sell to your audience. And sometimes that means
Right.
whoever's responsible for budget investing in projects at your own organization, sometimes you have to sell internally. And
Yes.
you talk about the soft skills of L&D and the individuals who are so passionate about that kind of adult education and fostering culture and growth. And it's a lot of soft skills. And you also have to have a way to sell using hard objective data. That includes, what is the average cost for a settlement for a sexual harassment case? I guarantee you it far exceeds whatever cost for that top tier L&D platform for sexual harassment training that is being measured against the one that's cheaper. So you go with the top tier one, let's just say it's like $100,000 a year. What is that one-off litigation or settlement for the harassment lawsuit? And if you talk about annualize, you also talk about reputation. What does that do to the
Mhm.
reputation of your organization? And it's really hard and costly to overcome a bad reputation like that. So it's not just sexual harassment, it's many other things too.
Right.
And so if you invest in a meaningful platform that costs whatever it is, the top amount, it has to
Right.
be justified. But if you are trying to cut corners because of the sticker shock of what it costs for that top plan, sure, go ahead, go with the one that's half that price. And every single person going through that training is going to be bored. They're going to make fun of it. They're not going to walk away with any real value and knowledge. And it also is just another thing to like say, well, that was a waste of money
Yeah.
versus here's the cost, here's the data, here's the opportunity. And so to invest in that, that's hard skills, that's data, and that is budgetary. So speak that language. And there's probably a lot of attrition. Let's talk about like training for like
Yeah.
skills and talent. And so retention, the ability to retain employees that are excellent at their job, high performers in any capacity, because you're giving them
Mhm.
opportunities to continue learning and growing and being satisfied in this organization. There's a growth trajectory and opportunity for them to continue to grow. You're investing in them. And by way of doing that, and it keeps them there. But by not doing that, not giving somebody the opportunity to grow and to stay within the organization, you've put all these months or years investing into this employee who's been excellent at their job. You're just going to lose that contract, you're done. You're letting it's a free agent that they're going
Yep.
to go to another team, or you can work on
Mhm.
giving them opportunities at a pretty low cost relative to the cost of attrition. Because when you lose somebody, especially somebody that's, admired, appreciated, and excellent at their job, there's a culture shock there too. People start questioning, well, Susan's gone. I'm not sure if I want to stay. What maybe I should be
Yep.
thinking
I've
about
been
what
in
else is
situations
out
like
there.
that. Yep. I call myself all sorts of different things, but I work in learning experience design. I work in L&D training, talent development, whatever you want to call it. I also design commercial courses. It's not just internal. It really needs to be a top priority in organizations because we're seeing a shift in how people are learning just in general, like whether or not they go to college, right? So you're going to see a lot more people not going to college or getting certifications. I chose eventually to get a certification instead of getting my master's degree because it was a better return on investment. I think organizations are going to need to see that they are going to need to provide these things and to be able to hang on to people, quality people. It's not about giving them more money. I mean, it is, but it's not about continually promoting them, right? Sometimes it's just about providing them what they need in their job, which is learning, because people like to learn, and opportunities to like stretch themselves, right? And always getting raises. Okay. Don't cap the raises. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you need to be continually giving somebody a 10% raise every year, but don't be skimpy, because there's only a certain level that some people will get to in their careers because that's just where their career goes, right?
Right.
So you still have to invest in them, give them opportunities to do something challenging, get their curiosity going. And that takes a lot of people because it's L&D, Yes, we
Yeah.
have AI and AI is going to make a whole lot of things a lot faster, but you still need people. And over time, I mean, I've been doing this a while and consistently there are never enough people on L&D teams. Never enough people. And they're always doing so much. They're the heartbeat of the company. I'm telling you, L&D people are the heartbeat of the company. They know everything that's going on because we're the counselors. You find out things. We have our safe spaces where we discuss things and try to figure out what to do for the training, but it's an important role. Organizations do not give it the credit that it deserves.
That's for sure. 100% agree with you. It comes down to how to help people and individuals. And it sounds like that's been a hallmark of your entire career is what can I do to provide a part of me to other people in service of others?
That's my whole philosophy. My life is being in service to others. That doesn't mean that I don't take care of myself. It doesn't mean that I don't take care of my own family and, make sure that they're protected and things are working smoothly for them before anyone else. But I have an obligation as a community member to be giving back and serving. And sometimes it's, donating money. Sometimes it's volunteering for a nonprofit and doing these kinds of skills to help them increase their value to the community. And sometimes it's just, consulting with clients and just being in service.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find solutions for people and just trying to help them. I don't have all the answers, but I can try to help them find them.
No one's expecting you to have all the answers. I think that one of the benefits of talking out ideas with somebody else is that you, even if that other person didn't give you the right path to go down or solution, is that talking things through helps you discover it yourself sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes it's just when you talk about meetings, there can be some really productive meetings, right? Some great brainstorming sessions, all sorts of things that can happen. But dear God, let's not do a meeting about a meeting.
Yeah.
And, if someone doesn't need to be in person, let's not do it in person. Let's make in person experiences valuable. It's something you cannot do online. You cannot do on the phone. It's something you specifically can only do in person. If you want to talk about artistry and all the things that influence me, I always tell people this experience. So a year and a half ago, I went and saw Janelle Monáe.
That's
And
awesome.
so I just recently listened to a podcast that she had done. I think it was before the tour. She was talking about how she likes to curate experiences. And that's very much how I feel what I do. I mean, I'm not Janelle Monáe in the corporate world, but
No,
I
it's
went to
relatable to you.
Yes, because I went to go see her. She's from Kansas City, so this is her hometown. It was probably one of the greatest experiences I've ever had at a musical performance, and I've seen a lot of concerts in my time.
What made it different?
She created an experience. She created something that you would never be able to get listening to her just on your headphones, right? Or even seeing a video of her. You had to be there to feel that. It was a theater of people that were all moving together. I don't know. I mean, it was such a brilliant performance, and the way she told stories and communicated with everyone in the audience, came down in the audience, brought her one of her music teachers from schooling up on stage, and he's, like, dancing around, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, this is, like, the epitome of, like, every music teacher's dream."
Yeah.
On stage with their famous student, you know? That performance just really inspired me. I don't know, maybe I was just, like, really receptive to it at the time because I was going through a lot of changes, and so I'm just always thinking about her when I'm trying to contemplate when someone comes to me and they're like, "I need a training," it's like, "Okay, well, what do you need? What is it you really need?" And sometimes we find out it's just an email that needs to go out, and then maybe they need to do a team outing,
Yeah,
you know?
totally. Patrick Lencioni has a book, Death by Meeting, which is
Yeah.
arguably the best title of any book ever. But part of the message is don't over plan and over meet. And to your point earlier about what are we going to get out of being in person? When does it have to be? Another one of my favorite lines is in response to a meeting, could this have been an email instead of a meeting?
Yes.
The opposite of that would be, okay, we are having a meeting. We are gathering IRL. And so how are we going to take full advantage of this time spent together? Your description of going to see Janelle Monáe in person and it being a truly life altering experience, this sense of elevated experience with so many other people. Another book, The Art of Gathering, talks about that. How are we
Yeah.
taking advantage of the time that we have invested together? We're here together. You can't get that in any other way. So what are we doing to
Yep.
capitalize on this? All these things resonate with the importance of being together with other people in real life versus just virtual when we can and when it makes sense. So now that we have it, what are we doing differently? Because sitting around a conference room table in the exact same method as we would just on a computer with a webcam, what is different about this experience? And it has to be more than just good snacks. It has to be that
Ye
we're doing something else because we have decided to be here together, all of us. So
Yes.
that's a great message. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's connection, right? When we're in person, we're really trying to connect, right? It's not that we can't connect here. I mean, I love the virtual space, and in fact, like, my social anxiety, I love the virtual space. It's much better for me, but that doesn't mean that I don't like being in person with people, but I want to feel that connection. I want it to be meaningful, not just, I'm in this space because people need to be in this space.
There's nothing wrong with listening to Janelle Monáe while you're going down the 110 in Kansas City.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Time and place, context. You're getting a great experience listening to her music and
Right.
sitting in the car and singing out loud, but it's a very different experience than going to see her at the theater in
Mhm.
person with those people
Mhm.
swaying side by side. So the same
Yep.
thing. We're in person. Virtual has so many benefits, so many
Mhm.
opportunities that we are
Yeah.
gaining from it. And it's not zero sum.
No.
We're here in person. What does it look like? How's this different?
I'm glad people are starting to recognize it. I hope that it continues and we don't start, let's just not do the easy way. I don't want the easy button. I'm not an easy button person. I'm just not.
Goes back to quality versus quantity.
Yeah.
I agree. We're all looking for high
It's not
quality
worth
experiences.
doing if you're not going to do it right.
That's right. When someone offers you a sweet and it's like, would you like this? Well, is it worth the calories? What's the point? Why am I going to waste the calorie count on something that's just not going to be fulfilling?
Yeah, right.
Save it for
right.
when it matters.
Right. Exactly.
This has been awesome. So Tara, I just want to say thank you for being here, for sharing so many very personal experiences of yours and learnings. This was a very different conversation and not one to be taken lightly. And I expect a lot of people to gain so much from the lessons and experiences that you've shared here. So I just want to say thank you personally.
Thanks for having me. It was Glad to talk about it. I'm happy to share things with people. I'm pretty much an open book. So
Fantastic. Well, we're here to listen and we're here to learn.
thank you.
Transferable Skills is produced by Cackle Media, music by Cost Monkey, and this episode was edited by Aaron Wertheimer. I want to thank our listeners for joining us on this episode. And remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.